It's like, there's so many of those stories where you don't know the impact you're having on people or connections or their journey. And yeah, I thought that was always really shocking and cool as well. So I just think those have been big learning experiences for me, for sure. Every episode, I learned something new about someone's journey, something cool going on, or a different way to think about something.
Welcome to the Lay of the Land podcast, where we are exploring what people are building in Cleveland and throughout Northeast Ohio. I am your host, Jeffrey Stern, and today I had the real pleasure of speaking with Duane Mancini, founder and CEO of Project Medtech, a Cleveland-based platform helping medical technology companies move from promising invention to real patient impact. What began as a podcast has evolved into a broader ecosystem of consulting, events, education, investor connectivity, and community building for medtech founders navigating the difficult path from idea to market. In our conversation, Duane and I explore his path from science and research into entrepreneurship and how Project Medtech grew from a curiosity-driven podcast into this larger platform, and what founders often underestimate about building in medtech. We talk about regulatory strategy, reimbursement, clinical validation, fundraising, the importance of team, and why Ohio has a unique opportunity to become a more important node in healthcare innovation globally. Duane is thoughtful, mission-driven, and deeply committed to helping more life-changing technologies reach patients. So please enjoy this insightful conversation with Duane Mancini. Lay of the Land is brought to you and is proudly sponsored by Cerity Partners. As a wealth management firm, Cerity Partners shares Lay of the Land's same dedication to serving local business owners, and the Cerity Partners Cleveland team understands the challenges that entrepreneurs and founders face here in Cleveland, Northeast Ohio, and beyond. Wealth comes with complexity and increased demands on time and resources. It is easy to become overwhelmed. Cerity Partners clients benefit from a unified team of local specialists who coordinate across both business and personal needs. With Cerity Partners' commitment to transparency and putting clients' needs first, complexity can become clarity. To learn more, please visit CerityPartners.com or call 216-464-6266 today. Cerity Partners, proud to be recognized as one of the top financial advisory firms in the country. I've always admired authentic community-first projects where the storytelling becomes the wedge and the platform to build trust, to learn, as we were just talking about, to kind of understand an ecosystem and create a foundation for something bigger, something more impactful. And so I've been looking forward to having you on for a while now, because I feel you've built this and continue to build upon it like really elegantly with Project Medtech in ways that I've admired from afar, because in a lot of ways, that is what I'm striving to do, as well. And so just looking forward to learning how you came to this kind of work, how it's evolved into what it is today. And a lot of places we could start, but just given some of the parallels in the spirit of what we're doing, I really am curious, like when you started Project Medtech, what did you think you were building at the time? And how, obviously it's evolved in a lot of ways, but what was the problem that you saw? What was the curiosity you had?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, when I had taken my first business development role at NAMSA and I was talking to a lot of startup companies, it was very apparent that we just weren't solving for the actual crux of the issue that these startup companies in life sciences were dealing with.
Hmm.
And then I think also the other part of it too was I was getting to spend time in other areas that weren't Boston, New York, or San Francisco, and learning about all this really cool innovation out there, but they weren't getting the headline of a $20 million seed round or a $10 million seed round. And so, part of it was, hey, there's other things going on. I wonder if I can create a platform that talked about those things and talked about these other areas, these other startup companies, where innovation's happening. And then the other piece of it too was these companies, especially in life sciences, you have to have local community backing. And then there's this next layer of like, well, how do you expand beyond that? And, if we could, use the podcast and then eventually our events section to kind of build this network and then give it away to the companies we work with, well, then, there could be something special there. It's like if we can maintain this network and make it really easy for great teams with great products to get to that next layer beyond their local ecosystem, that would create a lot less friction for these startup companies. And I thought the podcast was a great way to start doing that.
Start doing
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Because
hmm
it's interesting. If you were to just describe Project MedTech as a podcast or as an events platform or as a consulting firm, it's missing like the aggregate of
hmm
what it is. So like
Yeah.
how do you articulate like what is
Yeah.
Project MedTech?
Yeah, we talk about it as we're networkers, educators, and consultants. I mean, that's the core of what we do, and we do that in a few different vehicles, right? Our vehicles are, hey, we're going to have this podcast where, yes, we're educating, and it seems at the surface, that's all that really is, but it's also that we're networking. And then on the event side, it's the same thing. We're educating at our events, but we're also networking. And on the consulting side of the business, what we're enabling entrepreneurs to do is to get the resources they need in a really cost effective manner, right? Life science companies are so far away from revenue at the start of their company. And so, and the team that they're going to have as a commercial stage company versus a pre-commercial company is so different. And so if we can give them the fractional resources they need at the right time, all under one roof, so that you do get the value of having a finance, regulatory, quality, reimbursement, commercial, all looking at the opportunity from a very early stage, but you can move those people in and out as you need it. It makes those companies really capital efficient before they have to raise large commercial rounds. Um, and so a lot of what we do is just we are here for founders, and that's a big piece of our passion here is that we want to support founders and give founders truly what they need, which is they need the resources that we provide on consulting. They need the network that we can help build and foster and maintain for them. And they need the educational resources so that they understand where the pitfalls lie. And so, yeah, it's been a really easy mission and vision for us when you put that at the center of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Maybe just to take a step back and kind of ground
hmm
this in your story, what when you reflect on it, do you feel kind of first set you on this path that would pull you into the world of life sciences and med tech? Like where does that interest stem from?
Yeah, I've always been in sciences. When I was a kid, growing up, especially in high school, I definitely gravitated towards the sciences. I thought I wanted to be a pharmacist originally. And then when I went to the University of Toledo, I realized that I was really intrigued by research, like new
Hmm.
groundbreaking products. My first research product was working in the breast cancer space. And I can remember going to the Susan G. Komen Race for the Cure in Toledo and seeing they actually funded some of the research at the University of Toledo. And so I remember going there and just seeing like being just very inspired by all the people there, all the survivors, but also the other people doing research there, and this race for the cure. And from there, I had this, thing that I was like, I'm going to go work for the Cleveland Clinic one day. Like that was it. I'm going to go to
Yeah, yeah.
Cleveland. I'm going to work at the Cleveland Clinic. I'm going to be in research there. And yeah, I mean, that frankly started the whole spiral of like, I'm going to be in new innovative products. And then it was very easy to get almost addicted to like I got to see things years before they hit the market. And I got to work with the coolest new ideas. Most will never work. And but the 10 to 20% that get through and actually get to the clinic and get to patients, it was just really cool to know you had a hand in it. So that was the earliest I can remember. Like I knew I wanted to be in health and life sciences, but I think like any high school kid, I was like, oh, pharmacist, or a doctor or a nurse or whatever it is. But then getting into college and getting into research, it just was like, I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, which most people don't.
Right. Right. When did you feel the first kind of entrepreneurial inclination from all of that?
Ooh, that was for sure when I got into sales. So most of the roles I had before that were technical in nature. I got to spend time as a chemist, but then I got to spend time doing toxicology work. I got to spend time doing how do you get a product through the FDA. I got to spend time in how do you get a medical device paid for and reimbursement and clinical trial design and execution and these really technical roles. And then I got asked to take a sales role. And I thought I was really nervous to take that role because I was a scientist. But then I just became really enthralled with the idea of business development and sales and
Hmm.
what that was like and the process and solving people's problems and having conversations with folks. And it was really awesome. And then I think that is at fault though for the entrepreneurial bug too, because, I kind of realized that, hey, I have this unique skill set and why not me? Why can't I go do this? What's preventing me from solving this problem that I see? And yeah, that is 100% where it came from is that I saw this problem. I saw a unique ability to solve it. And yeah, maybe I had too much confidence that I thought I could do it.
Yeah. You need a little bit of the naive belief in yourself.
That's right. Yeah. 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 And a support system, though, that challenges you on it, because I do think that, you know, the idea started in 2020, right? And I didn't go full time into Project Medtech until the end of 21, beginning of 22. And I think that, you know, because I was able to do it, I was forced to do it. I mean there was, in 2020, from the time I had the idea for Project Medtech, COVID had started. My wife had told me she was pregnant, with our first child. And I was thinking about leaving a job. Right. And so I ended up transitioning jobs. So, financially, I had that security because I was still working and doing Project MedTech on the weekends and at nights. But I think that, to have a network and advisors around you that challenge you on when it might be the right time to actually do it, and have you thought about this and have you thought about that and what happens if this happens, I think is really important. It actually gave me more confidence to say,
Yeah.
hey, I am answering all these questions. It's ready. It's go time. Let's make the leap.
So to help orient us around like the problem that you were solving and the opportunity that you saw, I think it would be helpful to understand, because you've had this I think pretty unique vantage point end to end. What does it take to bring a an invention through to commercialization? You mentioned some of it, the biological safety work, the regulatory
Mhm.
work, the reimbursement, the trial design, the clinical strategy, the go to market, like not the normal software CPG, kind
Mhm.
of business. So what does it actually take, soup to nuts, to bring an invention into the world? And what did you come to understand about what the aspirational first time founder will likely only learn the hard way about what that actually takes and how you could help them?
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things to start was like there was this perception that you needed all the capital and all the capital sat on the coasts. And I'm sure that is accurate to some extent, right? I mean, there's more VC capital on the coast. I understand that.
Yeah.
I think the initial thing that I saw that I found really interesting is like if you just named if you asked people to name five major hospital systems when you think of like a top tier hospital institution, I think a few of them would be in the Midwest, right? But you don't hear about a lot of innovation. Like people would for sure name the Cleveland Clinic. You're probably going to name Mayo Clinic, and there's others that could be on the list as well. I'm not trying to exclude anyone, but those ones, if you ask just a normal person on the streets, would name those institutions. And so the whole idea was hey, there's probably a better way to do this, but I don't think people know all the different voices that need to be in the room when you're going through this. And also, there's a more capital efficient way to go about doing this. Like, how do you continue to de risk your company and product before you start to lose control of your company, because you're going to have to raise capital. It's going to take money to get to market. And as you raise more capital, you lose more and more control of your company. And so can you do this in a more cost effective way? I think a lot of early stage entrepreneurs are going to probably have the perception that it's all about their product. And we've done 260 some episodes of our podcast. We've talked to a number of investors. None of them would put product over team. Every single person we've talked to puts team over product. And so you need a strong team. Well, how do you get a strong team when you're trying to be super cost effective with this? And so it's like, if we can put a lot of these resources in place where, you don't have to worry about finance, you don't have to worry about regulatory, you don't have to worry about clinical or commercial or reimbursement, but you have these people around you at the table, you can get it de-risked enough and get it farther along than you think. And I think that also fits a lot with like the Midwest scrappiness. Our clients are all over the globe, but we're Midwesterners though.
Yeah.
Me and my two other co-founders we're Midwest guys. And so I think there's that scrappiness to it. And I thought that, this could be a really interesting thing to partner with some of these other innovations that are spinning out all over the place in areas you might not think of, and kind of pull them along with this Midwest scrappiness to continue to de-risk the product more.
Pull on the thread of team. How would you apply that to yourself? How did the founding team come together? What's the story there?
Yeah. So Rich Mazzola is one of the co-founders, and Aaron Tenhusen is another one of the co-founders. I think for me, I had the big vision. I always joke about this, like if the three of us were standing at the bottom of a staircase, I look directly to the top, and I look at the top and go, oh yeah, we can get there, no problem. Aaron looks 3 steps ahead and goes, hey, that's cool, Duane, but we got to get here first. And Rich looks at the very next step. Like that is our skill set, and it balances us out. And I think some of that early stage advice that I would give an entrepreneur is, hey, figure out what your weaknesses are and complement those. And for me, I'm definitely probably more on the head in the clouds type of individual. I see the big picture of where we need to go, but I need help getting there and focusing on those steps and figuring out what those logical steps are along the way. And Aaron and Rich balance those out perfectly. We also balance each other out from, I definitely have more of a commercial background. Aaron has more of an operations background, and Rich is been a fractional CFO for a number of years. And so it kind of was the Project Medtech model to found Project Medtech, right? I never had to worry about finances. I was able to offload that. Operationally, we were able to, Aaron took that. And so it let us really play to our strengths. And how we all met's a whole another story. Rich was a +1 at my wedding originally, actually, but we got to meet each other and talk more and built a good relationship. And Aaron and I, oddly enough, played volleyball together. And he was not even in life sciences; he was in automotive. He said, he just said, I kind of want to get into life sciences. It seems really interesting. I want to change. And at that time, Project Medtech had already been formulated. And I was like, I kind of want to make a run at this now. Let's start getting things in place. Would you be interested in this? And pitched him on the idea, and he came on board.
Lay of the Land is brought to you and is proudly sponsored by Roundstone Insurance. Headquartered in Rocky River, Ohio, Roundstone shares Lay of the Land's same passion for bold ideas and lasting impact from our community's entrepreneurs, innovators, and leaders. Since 2005, Roundstone has pioneered a self-funded captive health insurance model that delivers robust savings for small and medium-sized businesses. They are part of the solution to rising healthcare costs, helping employers offer affordable, high-quality care while driving job creation and economic growth throughout Northeast Ohio. Like many of the voices featured on Lay of the Land, including Roundstone's founder and CEO Mike Schroeder, Roundstone believes entrepreneurship, innovation, and community to be the cornerstones of progress. To learn more about how Roundstone is transforming employee health benefits by empowering employers to save thousands in per employee per year healthcare costs, please visit roundstoneinsurance.com. Roundstone Insurance, built for entrepreneurs, backed by innovation, committed to Cleveland. How would you describe the chapters of Project Medtech and how it's evolved, and just kind of where you see it today? If you're like looking up at the stairs, what you see ahead of you, just
Yeah.
what's behind you? How many steps have you climbed?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. The first chapter was the kitchen table chapter. I actually just sent Aaron and Rich a picture of it the other day. It's my now 5-year-old daughter in like a little high chair at,
Wow.
so many months old, sitting on the table while me and Aaron are talking about, where we want to go. It's funny. We laugh about it frequently, but we use a thing called a Miro board, which is honestly just a virtual whiteboard. But we put a lot of things up there and said, hey, this is what we want it to look like at scale. How do we get there? What do we want it to do? And some things were green, some things were red. But if we turn something red, we always put a reason why. The whiteboard looks like we thought it would look like. It's funny how little it changed. Maybe details of it changed, but big picture wise, we're doing what we wanted to do. We always had aspirations of having the consulting company. We wanted to have companies that we took equity in and have like a little venture studio play. And we do have those. We wanted the events company to be an independent thing. That was very important for us. That we were never doing it just to drive consulting business, but we were doing it. We wanted to maintain that network, bring people together. A high tide rises all boats. Same thing with the podcast. I mean, we're doing all those things. We're really working on tacking on this venture arm so we can actually make some more investments as well. And so, I think it looks very similar to what we had planned. And I think at this point, from a expansion wide perspective, we're as far as we want to go now. Like there's not like anything new on the horizon. We're in depth mode. How do we build more depth in all of these areas? And so I don't know where we're at in the staircase, because I don't know where Aaron would define that. But from if the staircase was where we're at from what we're gonna be, we're at the top almost. Now we got to climb the next staircase, which is building organizational depth in all of these areas. Which there we're starting to build that team. We're feeling really good about the team we have in place, and so we're definitely starting the climbing of that staircase as well.
So there's a lot of pillars in the business we could talk about, but I really more just because I think there's a lot of parallels in the journeys we've been on here and the evolution of the platform. But what sticks out to you when you reflect on 250 plus conversations with folks that are traversing this very difficult path of what does it look like to take an invention to market?
Yeah.
What have you learned?
Yeah.
A lot of the impetus that got us into this in the first place was these podcasts are the best way to learn from the best of what other people have already figured out. What sticks with you?
Yeah, totally. I mean, to your point, Jeffrey, like it's like, I think we get the question all the time because it is an independent like revenue stream for us. People are like, "Oh, if you didn't have a lot of listeners, would you still do it?" And it's like, of course, what a nice, what a great way to bond with someone and talk with someone, and what a way to learn. Like selfishly for me, yeah, I just learned so much from this experience, and there's specific episodes that stick out. There is really emotional moments that stick out. I just had one that it's not released just yet. It's coming out in the coming weeks, but it's like we've done 260 episodes. You've done over 250, and you can think back to specific moments that shock you, and to constantly be surprised. Like people always ask that, like, are you surprised anymore? I just had one where the first 15 minutes, I hadn't been that emotionally wrapped up into a podcast since we've been doing it. Like, she shared a deeply personal journey story in front of our audience. And it was so emotional, sad, like just all the feelings that it was the first time I felt silly asking more questions, like it just, I don't know, like you have moments like that that just shock you
Yeah.
all the time. There's pieces of advice that I do this frequently. I have a notes section on where I'm an Apple user. So my phone, my iPad, and my laptop. And I call it my master's in business because I didn't get an MBA. But I'll put little pieces of advice that I pick up from people's episodes where I'm like, wow, that's super powerful. I got to add that in. And I just find myself, it's like, it feels like every 10 to 15 episodes, that list just gets longer and longer,
Yeah, it's an ever
longer,
growing list.
Yeah. But that's selfishly for me, that's really cool. That keeps you going. That's a big learning experience. The other piece is another big learning experience was it's surprising how many different people listen to the podcast. For us, like, obviously you got to be really passionate about medtech to listen to a podcast called Project Medtech. But people all over the world, like, we would get outreach and they'd be like, "Hey, Duane, I've been listening to your or your podcast for 4 years. I finally licensed this technology out. I'd like to talk to you about some consulting work." Like, that would always shock me, is that someone was listening for that long. Or we would get people who reached out and say, "Hey, I did the podcast with you, and a person from this company reached out to us, and now we have a partnership." It's like, there's so many of those stories where you don't know the impact you're having on people or connections or their journey. And yeah, that I thought that was, always really shocking and cool as well. So yeah, I just think those have been big learning experiences for me, for sure. And then it's like every episode I learned something new about someone's journey, or something cool going on, or a different way to think about something. Yeah.
It certainly resonates. I mean, all
Mhm.
the downstream implications that sometimes you don't hear about that for 2 years, 3 years, after
Mhm.
it's happened, and it's always pretty powerful and amazing to hear.
Yeah, and like, like for you too, it's you think about the in-person events you've had and hosted. I just missed your most recent one, but you had one a few years ago at Playhouse Square. And, you think back to like stuff like that. It's like, think about all the people who connected at that event and potentially walked away with something, and where that's gone. And I think for me too, I've always talked about this in the podcast. I think that if you do things unselfishly, things will come back to you. Like, I'm a big believer in that as well. And it might not happen on the same time frame that you would want. And if you look at it super analytically, and it's like, well, if I do this, then I need this result, I don't know. I think if you have that mindset, then yeah, you'll hate doing podcasts or doing events or anything like this. It's a long game, and it's hard
It's,
sometimes to point to specific results. But if you put good out there, good will come back.
that also resonates quite a lot.
Hmm.
So you had talked about de-risking, and I think because of how unique the actual business processes relative, again, to, I don't know, enterprise software, where the market will tell you very quickly whether or not something is working. The feedback loops are really tight and quick. What does de-risking actually look like? And what have you come to understand about, what people can do to actually de-risk and maybe try and shorten the feedback loop, relative to a lot of other markets where reality is just going to tell you real quick.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. I think the biggest thing in life sciences, med tech, is clinical data. Like, this is absolutely the top of the food chain. I think some people coming into the industry is like, oh, when you get FDA clearance, that's a big deal, and it still is a big deal, but it's not. The FDA doesn't purchase your product. The FDA gives you a license to say, hey, you can sell your product, right? You can be in the clinic. Clinical data is 100 the biggest de-risking platform that you can work towards as an early stage company. And And I think that's part of when I talk about a Midwest advantage, that is the advantage of the Midwest, right? COVID changed things from an investment side. Yes, I think there was a piece of data that someone shared in an event after COVID, and it was before COVID, your initial seed investors were 100 miles away from you. After COVID, it was 600 miles. And we certainly see that. We work with companies all over the globe. People are investing in companies out of Florida, from Michigan. I mean, all over the place. Like that's just one example. But I think for a Midwest advantage, what better way to get good clinical feedback from people? You're going to have your early adopters, right? The first hospital you can convince to say, hey, let's try this on 10 patients, or let's try this on one floor or one site. But how do you go get feedback from people who maybe aren't early adopters, who are going to push a little bit more? And there's within the US healthcare system, there's a lot of different types of hospitals. And in the Midwest, you can get to a lot of different types of hospitals really quickly. Like if you just think about Cleveland and the patient population at Cleveland, you have three very different hospitals: Metro, Cleveland Clinic, University Hospital. Within a 2-hour drive, you have two hospital systems in UPMC and Allegheny that are provider but payer healthcare systems, right? That's a pretty cool advantage. Now you can see, hey, maybe this works really well at Cleveland Clinic, University Hospitals. How does it work in UPMC or Allegheny's health system? Also, in the Midwest, you have very rural populations. So how do you take this to a rural hospital system and figure out, does this fit in well at this hospital system? And so I think when you think about this, it's achieving clinical data is the highest bar you can clear. And it takes a lot of time to do that because you want to get there, you want to live on site, you want to see how it's being used, you want to see what the problems are. It's a complicated system. It's also a very rewarding system, right? We've seen some big announcements in the Cleveland area just in the last couple of weeks with some big acquisitions, right? And so and those are really cool. Those are huge acquisitions, high dollar amount. There are a lot of acquisitions that go under the radar. And if you are capital efficient with all of this and you can prove really good clinical data, there was just one up in Michigan where Stryker acquired Amplitude Vascular. It's a pre-commercial company that achieved really good clinical data. And Stryker came in and said, perfect, here's $400 million. We're going to put this into our sales system and sell this product because you spent time really figuring out where those painful bumps are going to be in this clinical validation. And that's even a big one. There's other ones that happen all the time where, people raise $5-10 million and exit for 100. And, that's a really good multiple for those early stage investors. But that clinical piece is the biggest de-risking piece that you can do as an early stage startup. And don't rush through it just to get to revenue. Take your time, really figure it out. The first product you go to market with is probably not the one that you're going to go commercial with. In some cases it is, but in a lot of cases it's not. You're going to make some adjustments and then you're going to commercialize that one.
So when a founder comes to you and says, we need to raise capital, what generally, how do you triage in the sequencing of, regulatory, clinical, reimbursement, commercial? How does capital play in the life cycle of life sciences businesses relative to, again, kind of the software or CPG kind of world that is different? Because I do think it is different. And I think it's interesting just to unpack the nuance of it.
Yeah. I think when you think about, how the capital plays in, there's obviously a lot of non-dilutive opportunities as well. And you have to play that up as much as possible. Ohio actually is a tremendous state from a non-dilutive perspective. And there's a lot of really good resources that folks can use in order to de-risk your business. The first thing we have to educate them on is the milestones that you think are big milestones are probably not big milestones for investors, right? Like at an early stage, especially when they first come to us and start talking about, hey, let's go raise from investors. It's, well, hold on a second. We need to have a succinct story here, right? And the first thing we need to figure out is the first question we're going to get no matter what is, what's the regulatory path with the FDA? So let's get that figured out first. Let's talk about that. But before we talk about that, let's talk about what your economic value is to the health system. So we have to answer those questions first. And if we can't answer, we can always answer what the value is for the patients or the clinicians for sure. But we have to address regulatory and economic value to payers and providers. Once we can address that, then we can go to investors and talk to them about, hey, the core thing that you have to convince them of is they have to see a path to get a return. There's not many investors out there who are just throwing money, and not expecting a return on this. So we have to be able to show them that there is a return that can come to them, and there's a very realistic path to that. And then, so once we can get through all that, then it's talking to them about a little bit more about the strategy of who we're going to go to, the fact that we have to have flexibility, because if you've raised money once, you've raised money once, right? There's a lot of different ways to get to the desired outcomes you need. And so we have to talk to them about the flexibility of that and being able to make in-game adjustments, if you will, right, to finish these rounds out. But where do you go for them? That's the other piece that the podcast has been super valuable for us is we've developed a list of probably 230 life science investors all over the US and mostly Europe, but a little bit in Israel as well. And it's just like there's a lot of capital. You just got to find it, match it up, figure out what stage you're at. The other thing to be careful about is who are you talking to? Don't go talk to a late stage investor and ask them what they want to see, because they're going to tell you that they probably want to see revenue or they want to see clinical traction. And then all of a sudden you have an entrepreneur now focused on, well, I got to get to revenue because so-and-so said that they'll invest if they have revenue. And it's like, well, you're 5 years from revenue. They might not even have a fund by then. They'll probably be fully invested. And then maybe their fund thesis has changed, So there's a lot of education that has to happen, Jeffrey, at the beginning, right? Of what do you need? But then also the different types of investors, VCs, early VCs, angel groups, corporate venture, hospital venture, family offices. What do they all want to see? How rapidly do they change and what motivates them? So kind of giving them that lay of the land, if you will, is really beneficial. Yeah.
In my experience navigating healthcare and building solutions for it, I've come to understand that a lot of the justification for the way things are done is frustratingly often that's just the way they've always done it. And that's the reason why, which is, I think not when that's the answer to why you do things the way you do, it's like an indication there's a lot of opportunity to maybe rethink how that works. Having seen as many companies as you have navigate this journey, what are the parts of the ecosystem and the process of getting something to market that you feel is like most frustrating? Like an alternative way of asking, like if you could redesign the process from scratch and address, the justification for the way things are as the way things have been done, what would you want to change?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's so funny because I think I'd have more answers for this if it wasn't for the podcast. Because I've thought, I've heard opposing views for,
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's changed. It's made me less confident in some of the answers. I think if I could change one thing, it would be that sometimes I think earlier stage investors think they have a hard job. But I think they think that they can pick winners and losers much earlier than I think is actually realistic, because the dynamic and aspect, I think, is really hard to figure out at that early stage. Like I know what I'll change because it's got me thinking about it, is that there's always this, sometimes I talk to these ecosystem folks within local ecosystems, and their first complaint is, well, we don't have enough jockeys for horses. And I think that is BS. I really don't think that is a bottleneck. There are so many, especially in life sciences, there are a lot of opportunities that does not require someone who's been there, done that, to spin it out of a institution and get it at least to the point where maybe you can bring in a CEO. I do think that is I don't agree with that. I think there's enough entrepreneurs that or willing entrepreneurs with the help of services like Project Medtech and others to get them far enough to where you can make a better decision on whether that person can actually take it to the next step, or you need to pass it along to another CEO, but at least it's de-risked a little bit. I don't know. Too many things I think sit within local ecosystems. I'm not talking about Cleveland. I'm talking about just local ecosystems in general, where there's this, yeah, hey, we don't have enough jockeys to take these, and it's like I don't buy that. The product is not baked enough to make that decision. Spin it out, let it go, let a first time entrepreneur take it. Or I mean, what's the alternative? It sits in the institution and never sees a patient. I don't know. Yeah, I think that would be my biggest thing I would rewrite is get that out of your head. That doesn't need to be the case.
Sort of a related question. What do you wish more people understood about this space that maybe they don't?
That your pathway with the FDA should not be the decision on whether you invest or not. We hear this so many times where investors like, ooh, it's with medical devices, there's a few different pathways with the FDA, and they they go based off risk, right? So you have class 1 medical devices, you have class 2, and you have class 3. Class 1 is a medical device that if it fails, it poses very little risk to the patient. Class 3 is like a pacemaker, right? If that pacemaker fails, a patient can die, right? That's a high risk. There's different pathways through the FDA. There's ones that are what's called a 510K. There's ones that are called a de novo and a PMA. De novo and PMA being longer, maybe requiring more data to kind of get clearance. We hear so many investors say they're a 510K, so this is really good. It's going to be easier to get through the FDA. And again, I'll go back and talk about the FDA. The FDA does not buy your medical device. And I just think that's a really broken way of thinking. You're going to need clinical data in order to achieve market access and to get to an exit. You're going to need these things. So just because the FDA tells you that you don't need clinical data, that shouldn't be a reason why you invest or not. And so I would break, if I could educate investors coming into the space, it would be that shouldn't be the first question you ask. That should be a secondary question, not a whether you invest or not question.
What should be the first question?
What is the economic impact you're providing to the U.S. healthcare system? I mean, that's the first thing you need to understand. Whether we like it or not, healthcare is a business, and there are two primary economic decision makers in the U.S. healthcare system, and you need to understand the motives behind each one of those. You have insurance companies and payers, and then you have the providers, the U.S. healthcare systems, whether they're the hospitals, the surgical centers, whatever it is. And so at a core, you have to be able to answer, what's the economic impact that you're going to provide to these different groups? And so that should be the first thing you're thinking about is if you don't have a slam dunk, we are doing this for one of these groups, then are you cheaper than the competitor? But you have to answer, we're talking about a business. So you have to answer the economic impact. That should be the first thing that anyone should want to understand about an early stage opportunity is, have you thought through that? And what is the economic impact?
How do you think about your own kind of impact with regards to driving results for other companies? Like, how do you measure your own success? What is the kind of impact that you would like to have looking back in retrospect?
Yeah, it's that has been in stages, right? So that's an easier question to answer in terms of where we're at in the staircase. At first, it was, can we help some really early stage companies raise capital and get to the next step?
Yeah.
And we've 100% answered that. in 2024, there was a point in time where we had like what we call enterprise companies, which are companies using us to help in more than just one of our domain expertise, where maybe we're helping in finance, reg, and commercial. And out of the 32, 24 had raised capital in like a 6-month period. Like that was a very good validation point for us of, okay, cool. That means we're getting companies to the next step. Then the next milestone after that was, are we getting companies we're working with from idea to in the clinic? That's a big milestone for us, right? So when we talk about measuring our impact, I mean, our mission is to accelerate medical technology to improve patient lives. And our vision is to create an ecosystem where medtech companies can thrive in. And so I think when you take those two things and you measure, well, what's measurable there? It's our companies raising capital and getting to the next step. Our companies reaching patients and getting into the clinic. Our companies successfully commercializing, and then our companies getting to exit. And so, if we think about the timeline, most med tech companies, the exit time is like 9 to 10 years. Well, Project Medtech's been around since 2020, and we've had a consulting division since 2022. So what can we realistically measure ourselves on? We were able to measure ourselves on companies getting funding, that's for sure. We're now able to say companies are getting into patients. And our next one will be our companies getting to exits. Now we've had 2 companies get to exits, but I think, those are probably just those are outliers. But now that more companies are progressing, how many are going to get to that exit point,
Yeah.
3, 4, 5 years from now? So those are our big ways we would probably measure our impact. And it's more than just consulting. Companies who have come to events and pitched at events or been on the podcast, it's like watching those companies be successful. Have we played even a small role in that? Obviously, with consulting, there's a heavier hand in our role there. But for us, it's all about impact. Like even when I was at NAMSA, I used to geek out on the fact that even if I just did their biological safety testing, which is a checkbox, they got to do it, and they were able to get to patients, I had I felt pride in that. Like it was like, hey, I worked on that product. And then you have those aha moments when you go see a family member in the hospital and you look at some of the different devices and you're like, I worked on that years ago. Like I did the safety testing, or, oh, we did the regulatory strategy on this, or we did the regulatory submission, and now it's affecting patients in a positive way. Those are the measurable moments for us, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, right. In the nature of the work you're doing, you don't need to make a big intellectual leap, to understand, all right, this is helping people live their lives better.
Yeah. Yeah. Longer, healthier lives. Yeah.
Yeah. It's easy to get behind.
Yeah.
Are you optimistic about the state of life sciences and medtech right now? What are you most excited about? What kind of worries you?
Yeah, no, I 100%. We're always bullish on that. I do think that when you compare the different parts of life sciences, like maybe pharmaceuticals to medical devices to diagnostics to digital health, I'm really bullish on the areas we focus in. We do some small molecule work, but it does limit. Like we don't do anything on the regulatory side of that or the quality side. So it does limit a little bit of what we can do. But for medical devices, diagnostics, and digital health, COVID like accelerated that forward because all of a sudden there was a focus on, you in this country, if you turn the TV on and watch it for 2 commercial breaks, you're probably going to see an ad for some pharmaceutical, right? You really don't see that much with device. You have in the past for some of these various glucose monitoring systems, and maybe some of the insulin patches, but that's fairly new. But the one thing that COVID kind of put a light on was your early detection systems, your diagnostic tests. Like how do we identify whether we have this or not, and how early can we identify it? And with medical devices, it's been pulled forward as well because there's a lot of innovation in there, and it's a lot of people are a little more resistant to take a drug the rest of their life, or maybe there's some type of permanent fix, right? And then I think on the digital health side and the wearable side, like it empowers patients and individuals to take more control over their health. I mean, think about, I see it so much. Like I wear a Garmin, but I used to be a big Whoop,
Yeah.
and until I wanted to get into some endurance sports, so I needed the Garmin. But it's like a lot of people are wearing those things and being able to monitor their health. And so I think I'm really bullish on the early detection system, and people being able to intervene quicker because of various diagnostic tests and things we can do from that side, improvements in imaging and a number of different areas like that. And so, yeah, I think that's a big piece and will carry a lot of momentum for a lot of years.
I think you alluded to this one kind of in pieces throughout the conversation, but what do you think the opportunity for Ohio is? What would you like to see happen there?
Yeah, I think Ohio has a lot of the really good ingredients, and people are putting it together. People are not having to necessarily leave as well. And I don't think there's any reason to leave. Like, I think for me, the most important thing for an early stage life science company is that you're close to your customer base. I mean, if you just went down 71, why would you ever go? You don't have to go anywhere, I mean, like I talked about Cleveland, you look at Columbus, you look at Cincinnati, right? There's top institution universities in all those areas. So there's enough research and innovation coming out of all the institutions, within Ohio. There's enough healthcare providers in Ohio with different patient populations, all and not just like rural to urban, but peds to adults. I mean, if you have a pediatric device, you really should come to Ohio. And there's a lot going on in that space. Investorized, right? There's more funds popping up, but there's also, like, for us too, like there's more funds popping up, but that's not even like a big issue for us. We have a lot of companies that are in Ohio who are raising capital, early stage seed capital from outside of Ohio. They're not moving to these other areas, but they're raising the capital and staying where they're at. So that's a positive thing. And the more that happens, I promise you, the more early stage investors will say, hey, wait a minute, we weren't in on that deal. We want to be in these deals. So they'll start looking at them more. And if these entrepreneurs have exits, they'll probably stay in Ohio and reinvest in Ohio. And then you have groups like yours and the Ohio Fund that are solving really big issues because that's growth stage capital. So now these companies can grow here. And from an Ohio perspective, we do an event in Europe called Coming to America. It's obviously named after the Eddie Murphy movie. And one of the first things we show is if you raised $2 million and you were a European company and you came to the US to set up your operations here to go after the US market, if you lived in Ohio, just off rent and talent, you would last twice as long as if you went to one of the coasts. And, one of the people said, well, yeah, but don't we want to be on the coast from a networking perspective? And I said, don't you want to be at the Cleveland Clinic or Nationwide Children's or Cincinnati Children's or University Hospitals? And it's like, oh yeah, those are really good institutions. It's like, yeah, so no, why do you want to be there? You could set up shop here. So I think Ohio has a really interesting play. Also, we didn't even talk about manufacturing. So like when it comes to supply chain, it's like Ohio does manufacturing really well. So I think the core ingredients are here. It's just maybe not being one thing. Ohio, the Midwest probably doesn't do well is talk about ourselves, sell ourselves. And I'm guilty of that too. Like, I mean, if anytime, and a lot of people are like this, like anytime you talk about someone else in Ohio, it makes that person uncomfortable. You're just trying to play them a compliment, but it makes them uncomfortable. You can see them squirm, in their seat. And so I just think, we got to brag a little bit more. We got to talk about the wins. There's a lot going on, but Ohio has all the ingredients to do it. So, yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I certainly believe that as well. You mentioned some of the things we haven't talked about, and there's way more things that we haven't talked about than we have. Is there something that feels particularly important when you reflect on your journey, on the work you're doing, anything else that you would want to kind of surface here?
Yeah, I think that the one thing that I think has been great is just the support, the people who get in your corner. Like when we first started, I think generally speaking, there is a little bit of hey, can they actually do it? I know what you're talking about. Yes, that sounds great, but can you do it? But once you start to prove that out, the ecosystem gets behind you for sure,
Yeah.
which I think is a big benefit. And I know like when we were expanding from working just with startups to now going a little bit earlier and working with more institutions, a lot of our initial support came from people in Ohio. Like one of our first big partnerships was with Bounce Innovation Hub and Jumpstart and Case Western, Ohio State, University of Cincinnati, like Nationwide Children's, the MPDC. Like there's a lot of really good partners that believed in what we were doing and trusted us to add value to their organizations as well. And then that helps us. And, now we've been able to expand that specific institutional support to areas all across the country. But because we're able to do that with the institutions here and build that good partnership and almost have that clinical validation, but business validation, and then have references, like I think that is a big piece of this is with anytime you talk about local support systems, it can be a mixed bag because some people are going to have bad experiences. But I think once we got past that hurdle of we're here to stay, we add value, the ecosystem is just really supportive.
Yeah. No, I certainly subscribe to the idea that if you put it out there, this is what you want to do, then the folks in your vicinity kind of conspire to help you get there.
Totally. Yep. If you can put your head down and just focus on creating value, people will see it and then people will support you. And I do think Ohio has done that really well, at least for us, right?
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we'll work the bookend it here. Yeah. Lots more I know we could talk about, but I'll hit you with our traditional closing question, which is for a hidden gem in Cleveland.
Ooh. Well, okay, I have to do this. And I have two. One, it's in Strongsville. There's a place called Don Pomeroy's house, and the restaurant's great. The pub is awesome. It's much more my scene. They serve a really good pint of Guinness. It's just a cool place. But that's nearby. But the place for Cleveland, broader Cleveland, and his name is Justin Carolyn. Him and a group of others started a company called Martha on the Fly. They do breakfast sandwiches. It's in Tremont. He's a friend from high school. It's awesome, though. It's the best breakfast sandwich you'll have. They do lunch now as well. It's on Professor Avenue in Tremont. It's a super small place. The place was designed by another friend of ours from high school. He did all the architectural work. It's a really cool place. But the crazy story is Justin did the Project Medtech logo. So if this is on video,
cool.
On a shirt. Yeah, he designed the original logo for Project Medtech. And also
That's
did all
awesome.
the Martha on the Fly stuff. So Martha on the Fly, it's in Tremont. It's incredible.
It's a perfect plug. Well, Duane, I just want to thank you for coming on, for the work that you do and sharing a bit of your story.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and thanks for the work you're doing too. Like I said, it's such a cool thing what you're doing, and you're telling all these entrepreneurial stories and giving them a platform, and you never know who you're going to connect with through these things. And so I really appreciate all the work because I know it's a lot of hard work.
Well, thank you. It means a lot. Well, in the spirit of that, if folks had anything they wanted to connect with you about, to follow up, listen to your podcast or anything else, kind of where would you direct them?
Yeah, projectmedtech.com is a great place to start. It's actually going to be probably revamped by the time this gets released. Project Medtech on LinkedIn is a good spot. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well. So reaching out to me on LinkedIn and sending me a message, I'm always get back to people there. But yeah, those are really good places to start.
Perfect. Thanks again, Duane.
Awesome.
That's all for this week. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show. So if you have any feedback, please send over an email to jeffrey@layoftheland.fm or find us on Twitter @podlayoftheland or @sternfa, JEFE. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please reach out as well and let us know. And if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or on your preferred podcast player. Your support goes a long way to help us spread the word and continue to bring the Cleveland founders and builders we love having on the show. We'll be back here next week at the same time to map more of the land. The Lay of the Land podcast was developed in collaboration with the Up Company LLC. At the time of this recording, unless otherwise indicated, we do not own equity or other financial interests in the company which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of any entity which employs us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.